If you're anything like me, you are probably planning on getting married one day. You're probably dating and looking for the right woman. Or maybe you have found the one. You may have even proposed to her. If so, then congratulations. I hope everything goes well for you. But before you start planning the wedding, there's something you need to know. The rate of divorce in the United States is currently 50%. Fully half of all couples that marry end up in divorce court. Out of these, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. When accounting for just college-educated women, that figure jumps up to 90%. Now, hopefully you'll be in the lucky half and you don't have to deal with this. You'll live a long and happy life together with your wife and children. But just in case, pay attention to this info, because it could save your future, your sanity, and even your life. Now, why did I say end up in divorce court instead of get divorced? Because if you do decide to get divorced, or more likely, your wife decides she wants a divorce, then that is simply the beginning of a long, drawn-out process. A process that most men describe as hell. To get divorced, you can't simply fill out a form that says, "You're divorced." You have to go to court, and a judge has to approve the divorce. If your divorce litigation takes only 1 year, then you are extremely fortunate and in the minority. Divorce usually takes 3 years or more, with many taking anywhere between 5 and 8 years. This is because the longer the divorce proceedings get drawn out, the more money lawyers, experts, investigators, and other related contractors make. Which brings us to essential fact number 1. You will lose most, if not all, your savings just by paying attorney fees. Divorce is a $50 billion a year industry in the United States. The average contested divorce in the U.S. costs $50,000, and that is only the proceedings alone. It does not cover the child support payments and alimony payments that you have to start paying afterwards. The primary reason for this is that attorneys get paid on an hourly basis.
Attorneys get paid by the hour. The more accusations they make towards the other side, the more things they ask you to send them, the more papers they file with the courthouse, the more they earn, and the more it costs you.
Lawyers handle cases in a fairly similar fashion. They set an hourly rate, take a retainer, and then bill hourly against that retainer, and then create bills from the hours that they spent later on.
I only know, really, of one other firm in my area that does a flat fee. Everybody else is hourly. If a judge is late and you're sitting there for 3 hours, that client's getting billed for those 3 hours. I start to feel bad for them.
Yep, you heard that right. You get billed for every hour of the attorney's time, even when nothing's happening. When you pay someone by the hour, you can understand why they might want to drag out the job for as long as they can.
And there are no limits. When attorneys get started, they have no incentive to stop until you run out of money.
If your case is taking years and years, then that means some attorneys just putting in a lot of frivolous motions to delay the case.
In the 60s, it'd take a few months, a year. Now cases drag on 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Which is extremely expensive, as you can imagine.
You have lawyers who are in it for the money, who are greedy, who will milk a case.
The attorneys definitely don't want to settle the cases because once they do, their income stream has been cut off.
A lot of people go into debt as a result of their divorces.
Some attorneys automatically put a lien on your house just to make sure that eventually they get paid. We took out an equity line of credit at my parents' house, and that's been maxed out now. I think it's $250,000. What they do is bleed you until all the money is gone.
And this is a nationwide issue. No matter which state you live in, this is the reality. You might think, if that's the case, then I won't hire a lawyer. I'm an educated guy, I'll do my research and fight my case myself. But can you? Because essential fact number 2, they've made the law so complex that you have to hire these specialty lawyers, called divorce lawyers. And there are only a certain number of them, and that drives up their hourly rate. And you have to hire them if you want to have even a hope of winning your case. Because chances are, your wife is going to hire one, and if you don't have one yourself, he's going to run rings around you, and you're going to lose everything. Your savings, your assets, and your children. You may even end up in jail. And no, that's not an exaggeration. Why? Because child support. Essential fact number 3. In the absolute vast majority of cases, you as the man will be the one who has to pay child support to your wife. If you cannot do so, or if you even miss monthly child support payments, you could go to jail. The child support calculations, as a rule, always set the orders too high. This becomes a burden on the paying spouse, almost always the man, and an asset for the recipient spouse, the wife.
These people end up racking up a big child support debt. A lot of states have interest on the debt. Sometimes that interest is as high as 10 or 12%. And the person ends up saddled with a debt that they can no longer pay. People are being put in jail for not having the ability to pay their child support.
Now, you're most likely a dedicated father. You love your kids and you want the best for them no matter what. In fact, you want your kids to be impacted as little as possible by the divorce. So you might say, of course I will pay whatever is needed. Well, that's the thing. Who decides how much is needed? I'll give you a hint. It's not you. It's the judge. The judge calculates child support based on two things: the difference in income between you and your wife, and who gets the most time with the kids. This means that the more time your kids spend with your now ex-wife, the more money she is entitled to get from you. If she also makes less money than you, then the burden of payment on you becomes greater. Therefore, your wife now has all the incentive in the world to want to keep the kids with her. But your ex-wife is not the only party who now has an interest in keeping your children away from you. The state itself benefits by doing so. That's right, the state. How, you ask? Because of a law called Title 4D of the Social Security Act. Pay close attention to this. This is very important. Title 4D of the Social Security Act is a federal law that requires states to manage child support programs. It was added to the Social Security Act in 1975. What does Title 4D do? It establishes child support orders, enforces child support orders, tracks and reports on child support payments, and helps establish paternity. But while it may have been started with good intentions, it has since morphed into a mutated monster that is completely contrary to its original purpose. The thing is, once a government program like this starts, it tends to only expand, because it now has employees, often numbering in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. And these employees only have jobs because of the program, and therefore they need to create a need for their presence in order to justify their job. Not only that, but the Title IV program requires the relevant government employees to increase the amount of money they collect year on year in order to be eligible for the incentive pool. Let me repeat that for you just in case you missed it. The more money the state employees can squeeze out of more number of fathers on a yearly basis, the more sure they can be of getting to keep their jobs and the more eligible they become for a raise. This is because the federal government provides the funding for Title IV, and the states compete against each other to be eligible for it. The states that show an increase in the child support orders collected as compared to the previous year are awarded the federal funding. So employees, in order to keep their jobs, have to do everything they can to increase child support orders. What's the easiest way to do it? Well, if you and your wife amicably decide to share the custody of your kids, and therefore the expenses of raising your kids on a 50-50 basis, then that's bad news for the government. However, if you and your wife are litigating because your wife wants sole custody of the kids, or if the judge awards an 80-20 split, then you have to pay money to your wife. And that entitles the state to take over because that qualifies them for Title IV money. It is their job to see how much you're paying, enforcing you to pay it, tracking your payments, and reporting on you if you fail to pay it. In fact, the funding that the states receive for Title IV Social Security is such a lucrative source of income that the states do not want for couples to divorce amicably and share custody and child care expenses. Take a look at this video of a representative of the Bar Association in the state of Illinois arguing that if the 50-50 shared parenting law passed, then the state would lose millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money.
Thank you to the chair and to all the representatives in attendance today. I am Michael Strauss. I'm a family law attorney in Lake and Cook County. I'm also vice president of A Safe Place and secretary of the Family Law Section Council of the Illinois State Bar Association, and I happen to also be the co-author of the Illinois State Bar's resolution against this bill. Currently the state of Illinois gets federal funding and grants, and individuals obviously get state aid. There's very real potential for this state to lose federal funding, and I'm talking millions, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars, as well as parents not being eligible for the state aid. This issue has not been addressed by those in favor of this law, and so potentially Illinois loses a lot of money, poor families lose more money, and our state gets less money.
What's in the best interest of the kid is not to worry about how much federal dollars we're going to get for food stamps in this country. It's ridiculous.
There's already litigation on that issue, isn't there, when there was 50-50 for parents?
There have, and in speaking with some of the judges in Cook County, they brought up that there's been ungodly amounts of litigation to ensure that the people kept their food stamps, because frankly, it's life or death. Without them, they have a big problem.
So let's make sure that we keep our kids out there. Let's keep the fight on so that we can continue to get food stamps. I want my people off of food stamps. Yeah. What do you mean? That's ridiculous to even bring that up.
Another reason why states like Title IV-D is because it enables them to put more people on the government's payroll at little cost to themselves. This is because the states are reimbursed 66 cents for every dollar that they spend on child support payment collection efforts. Here's Mark Ludwig, the Executive Director of Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, to explain.
One part basically is a reimbursement of 66 cents on the dollar for every dollar the state spends in collection efforts. People have been saying that the state gets reimbursed for the dollars they collect. They do not get reimbursed for the dollars they collect. They get reimbursed for the money they spend on collection efforts. So for instance, if they hire, let's just for argument's sake, say they hire 2 people at $50,000 a year, and their person's sole job is child support collections, then the state would get reimbursed $66,000 of that money. Now, that in itself is just massive. Imagine if you owned a business and somebody else was going to pay 66 cents on the dollar for every employee you could hire. Can you imagine how many more employees you would hire? There's not a business person around that wouldn't hire more employees if you had that kind of free money coming in.
In short, the government, with full support of the law, is pitting parents against each other. And the ones who lose are fathers and the children, while the mothers, the attorneys, and the state benefit. If you are under the impression that you can get justice for yourself and your children by pleading your case before a jury, then be aware of essential fact number 4. There is no jury in family court. There is only the judge. The United States Constitution guarantees all citizens the right to a trial by jury. However, family court is a court of equity, which is technically not a court of justice. What this means is that while you will get a jury if you go to court for a financial or a criminal litigation, you do not get one when you are fighting for your rights as a father and fighting for the rights of your children. In family court, the judge reigns supreme. The original intention of this setup was to have a man of the law arbitrate or mediate a family dispute in an effective manner that would satisfy both parties, a task for which a jury was determined to be ill-suited.
And if you have a really nice judge and a friendly courtroom and very simple laws, that's not such a bad idea. But what we have today is 2,000 pages of family code, ridiculously complex, written half in Latin.
Although there's a logical, well-intended policy for eliminating the jury, the unintended consequence is that it gives the judge enormous power with almost no accountability.
That's right. No accountability. In case you find that hard to believe, listen to this.
There is no law in family court. There's only what the judge wants to do, period.
All kinds of basic mechanisms that exist in the criminal and civil courts in this country don't exist in the family courts. In a family courtroom, the judge dominates the proceeding.
In my world where there's no jury, you are the decision maker. I'm more comfortable with that.
How much time do you have to devote, would you say, to each case?
On a typical Monday or Tuesday, I would have a calendar of anywhere from 15 to 40 cases.
The average case, in all fairness, is maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
The Court of Appeal in San Diego ruled that actually judges did not have to read the pleadings before they made their rulings. So now it's a local rule. If you want a judge to actually read the pleading, you've got to make a special request beforehand. Not too many people know that.
It's not for the father to decide. It's not for the mother to decide. It's for the judge to decide after the judge has weighed all the factors.
Yeah. I hope you heard that loud and clear. It's not for you as the father to decide, or your wife as the mother to decide what happens with your children anymore. It is for the judge to decide. But surely, you can trust this honorable, experienced man of the law to deal with your case properly. I mean, it's not like he's on a power trip or something, right?
All judges have the same middle name, God.
My father was a lawyer who handled a general practice, and he occasionally would take me to court with him. When I was about 14 or 15, he had a case, and the woman was on the stand, and he's boring in on her, and he's boring in on her, and he says, "And didn't you, on July 5th, have sexual relations with your husband?" And she breaks down crying and sobbing, and I'm looking at this, and I said, I got to get into this. This is great.
And just in case you were under the impression that you could win your case by yourself without a lawyer because you have truth on your side, well,
it's complicated because the judges have special relationships with a lot of these lawyers.
And unlike other public officials, judges do not have a waiting period between public and private practice. A judge can retire one day, practice as an attorney the next day, and then go back to being a pro tem judge a day later.
Judges will oftentimes try to get very cozy with the law firms that they want to work for upon retirement as a judge. And so it creates a conflict of interest. The other conflicts of interest is lawyers are allowed to contribute to the election campaigns of judges, appear before them in court, and yet give them money toward their election campaigns. And so I'm afraid what that does is it can allow certain law firms to buy influence with the judge. Or if it's not direct campaign contributions, it could be things like appointing the judge to some committee that's a prestigious committee, or throwing a fundraiser for the judge. And so
there's no oversight or accountability?
I wouldn't say there's no oversight. There are judicial review committees, but as we point out in the film, they rarely discipline a judge. It's extremely rare. And those review committees are made up of judges and lawyers.
in short, the lawyers and judges are besties and go to each other's parties. So when the judge gives his verdict in your case, you know, his 57th verdict of the day, do you think he's going to listen to your meticulously documented case or go with your wife's lawyer's recommendation?
There's so much at stake in divorce. Custody of the children, division of assets, and support orders. To decide these complicated issues, parties don't even get a jury, they get a judge who often doesn't have enough time to hear all the facts. This dynamic creates an incentive to lie and create false allegations against the opposing party without any sanction or penalty for making up malicious accusations.
Because there are so many incentives to lie in court during a divorce, people often make up false abuse charges. Physical violence and sexual assault are crimes, and our justice system is set up to handle criminal accusations like this. But family courts also listen to and act upon such accusations. And because false accusations are so common during a divorce, these cases are typically not turned over to criminal court. Family court judges have to distinguish between true abuse victims and those crying wolf for financial gain.
One of the biggest problems in family court is there are so many false accusations and so few consequences for those accusations.
Financial ruin and losing access to your children are not the only possible consequences of divorce proceedings. You could very well lose the final and most important thing you have to your name, your reputation. Because essential fact number 5, there are no consequences for false and defamatory allegations made in front of a judge in family court.
It may be that, in fact, there is no violence, but they make it up because they've talked with their friends or they've gone to a lawyer who said, well, make it up, and if you really do a good job, then you can get him kicked out. Now you're in the house. You have a big leg up in keeping the kids and maybe keeping possession of the house.
I've counseled women and a few men on how to get the other side thrown out of the house.
How hard is that to do?
If you follow my instructions, easy.
Domestic violence, first of all, is defined so broadly. There's so many things that can count as domestic violence that it's not hard. It's not hard to be accused of domestic violence.
And if you are under the impression that your now ex-wife will be reasonable and not try to ruin you financially or your reputation, think again. Because as the saying goes, When robbing Peter to pay Paul, you can always count on the loyal support of Paul. Or, in this case, when robbing Steve to pay Sharon, you can always count on the loyal support of Sharon. And your wife has absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain by making horrible things up about you. And the biggest thing she stands to gain is spousal support, also called alimony. Essential fact number 6. Alimony is paid by the higher-earning spouse, which is almost always the man, to support the lower-earning spouse, almost always the woman. There are different types of alimony. The first is temporary alimony. This is money that the judge will order you to pay to your wife while the divorce is pending. The second is rehabilitative alimony. This is money that you will be ordered to pay her to quote-unquote help her become self-sufficient. Though why would she want to, now that she's getting free money? The third is reimbursement alimony. This is money you will have to pay to reimburse her for quote-unquote expenses incurred during the marriage, aka anything that she paid for, that she now wants back. And finally, the kicker, permanent alimony. This is money that you will be forced to pay her for the rest of her life. Your only way out of this is if she dies or remarries. So you will find yourself praying she gets hit by a car or that she finds some other schmuck to put a ring on her finger. It's kind of like a multi-level marketing scheme. The only way out is if some other fool buys in. Different states have some variations regarding spousal support. Judges in New Jersey may order you to pay limited duration alimony to your wife if the marriage was particularly short, when rehabilitative or long-term alimony wouldn't be appropriate. A Tennessee judge may order you to pay transitional alimony if he or she decides that your wife is economically disadvantaged and doesn't need rehabilitative support, but that she does deserve help to adjust to the economic changes that come with divorce. A couple of states have set upper limits on how long rehabilitative support can last. In Florida, rehabilitative alimony can't last more than 5 years. In Texas, judges must limit spousal support to the shortest amount of time needed for the recipient to earn enough to meet their needs. But none of these limits apply to permanent alimony. Because for couples that had a marriage, quote-unquote, of long duration, judges continue to have the legal authority to extend spousal support indefinitely. The law presumes that a marriage was lengthy if it lasted at least 10 years, but a judge may order the payment of permanent alimony to shorter marriages at his discretion. So there is no limit to how long spousal support can last. Permanent alimony is just that. Permanent. Its purpose is to place men on the hook to provide for the women they married, even after the women divorce them, because the government certainly doesn't want to pick up the tab. But what if your wife makes more money than you? Are you as a man eligible for alimony? Yes, in theory, but judges rarely award alimony to men.
In the last 40 years, I have had 4 cases that I remember of men getting alimony that I had to twist their arms and beat them up in order to get alimony for them. Should men seek alimony? More of them should. Why don't men get alimony? Because it's my personal belief that the laws are neutral. They're gender neutral, but men do not get treated fairly when it comes to alimony in the court system. Judges are biased against them. They are, and I'm sorry to say it, but that's the truth.
I think family court is biased against men. In my experience of handling these cases all over New York State for plus 20 years, what I've seen is they don't usually get a break with child support. When it comes to custody and visitation, if they want to prove they're the best dad in the world, they need to really prove it. And with spousal support, a lot of times, if the wife is the moneyed spouse making a boatload more money, the judges will tell you, I don't care, I'm not giving him spousal support. Yet if the roles were reversed, it would be exactly the opposite. Just not fair. There's nothing in the law to say that anything is gender specific. It should be an equal playing field. It's getting better. It's better than it used to be 20 years ago, but it's still biased.
No matter how much I tried to prove I couldn't afford $865 a week, it didn't matter. The judge will say, do you have the money? And you say no, and they cuff you and shackle you and take you right up to jail.
Also, alimony is treated like child support in the way that you can definitely go to jail for not paying your alimony. You can lose your license. You can lose your passport. Shout out to the passport bros. You don't pay your alimony, they can take away your passport.
That's right. Your wife can literally wake up one day and decide she wants to cash you out. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, man. So she can literally cheat on you and then collect alimony. I don't think men know this. I actually know a guy whose wife cheated on him 15 years into the marriage, took half his pension, and he had to pay her alimony and child support. So don't think that there is any moral obligation for judges to award less money because a person cheated. Cheating eliminates alimony in Georgia, but it may be another state, but Georgia is for sure. So if you in Georgia and your spouse cheat, make sure you record it, get some proof so you don't have to pay alimony.
But is there anything you can do to protect yourself in this situation? Like a prenup. Can drawing up a prenuptial agreement between you and your fiancé before you get married avoid this situation? Some people would have you think so.
If you are getting married and want to preserve your financial security, a prenup is a valuable tool to consider.
Since marriage and divorce have a huge impact on love and money, it might be worth considering a prenuptial agreement, or prenup for short.
Whether somebody makes $40,000 a year or they make $4 million a year, each of those people need prenups.
Well, let me spare you a lot of research time and give you essential fact number 7. No, a prenup does not work. Why not? After all, a prenup is a contract, and usually a court must honor a contract that both parties have signed. That would be true if you were arguing your case in a court of justice. But as we previously made clear, a family court is a court of equity. And here, as we noted before, the judge is basically God, who can do whatever he wants without consequence. Here's the lowdown on prenups. A prenup can be declared invalid for any of the following reasons. If one party was pressured or coerced into signing it. If your wife says to the judge that she was coerced into signing it, the prenup gets dismissed. This coercion need not necessarily be from you. Any pressure put on her by your lawyer or family members also counts. If one party did not read it. If your wife says she did not read it before she signed it, it gets thrown out. If one party did not understand it. If your wife says she did not understand what she was signing, out it goes. If there is false information in the prenup. If any detail in the prenup can be proven to be false, even technically, by your wife's lawyer, then nope. If the prenup contains child support or child custody provisions. This is a big no-no to put in a prenup, because as we have seen thus far, a whole lot of people from lawyers to government agencies have a vested interest in who your kids go to after your divorce. And so, child custody provisions are not allowed to be included in prenups. Your children are their business, not yours. Also, it might offend Mr. God. And finally, it cannot be quote-unquote grossly unfair. This is essentially a catch-all clause that covers whatever is not covered under the previous clauses. And who decides if the prenup is unfair? You guessed it. The Holy One. This last clause gives judges full discretion in whether a prenup can be enforced. This is why prenups almost never stand up in court. All your wife has to do is claim she was pressured into signing it or that she did not understand what she was signing, and your carefully thought out and meticulously drawn up prenup gets tossed out like yesterday's garbage. This is why prenups are not worth the paper they're written on. You might say, then why are prenups even a thing if a judge can subjectively rule it to be unfair? They seem to serve no purpose. Well, I wouldn't say that. They serve the purpose of providing an illusion of safety for men who are thinking of getting married. And that's important. Anything that helps persuade the lamb to walk to the slaughter willingly under a false sense of security is a good thing. Essential fact number 8, that every man must know about divorce. You will most likely lose your house. In the vast majority of cases, the family home is awarded to the mother so that she can live there with the children. This doesn't even have to be after the divorce. All your wife has to do is tell the judge that she feels unsafe with you at home, and the judge will order you to leave the house even at the start of the divorce proceedings. And once this happens, the probability of her being awarded the house at the conclusion of the litigation is extremely high. You will be forced to give your ex-wife the house so she can continue to live there with your kids. You are legally obliged to continue paying for the house's rent, mortgage, and property taxes, even though you no longer live there. This is in addition to whatever living expenses you have since you now have to find a place for yourself. Your ex-wife may start dating other men and bring them over to your house where your kids are. You have no control over this whatsoever. Essential fact number 9 about men and divorce. Your financial situation is likely to take such a big hit that it may take you decades to recover, if you ever do. Divorce litigation is the 4th most common cause of bankruptcy in the United States. And when adjusted for gender, it is the 3rd most common cause of bankruptcy after medical costs and job loss. It is not uncommon for men to become homeless during a divorce. If you are fortunate, this will be a temporary situation that you can bounce back from. You may be sleeping in a motel or sleeping in your car for a period of time. However, if you are not so fortunate, your financial situation could become so dire that you become dependent on the kindness of your friends or relatives. And finally, essential fact number 10, and possibly the most emotionally devastating one of all. You will in all likelihood not be able to see your children on a daily basis, or even make it to their important milestones. This is because the government now controls when and how often you get to see them. Whatever dreams you had of how you would raise your children and what kind of a relationship you will have with them will no longer be possible. There is a good chance that there will be a degree of estrangement between you and your children, depending on what your wife tells them about you. In conclusion, by getting married, you essentially give a woman the means and the incentive to throw a nuclear bomb at your life. When all is said and done, your finances will likely be ruined for years, if not decades. Maintaining a loving relationship with your children will become an uphill battle, and your work-life balance will be destroyed. You are likely to go into depression with all the risks that entails, such as possible alcohol abuse and substance abuse. You may even, if you are extremely unfortunate, end up homeless or in jail. So how do you protect yourself from this? The rule number 1 of any undertaking is, never make a deal with somebody that has everything to gain by breaking it. In the past, women used to marry for financial security. Now they divorce for financial security. In these times we live in, marriage is an IPO for women. Divorce is cashing out. And children are an asset that produce passive income. This scheme is enforced by the government. And with lifetime alimony, a woman does not have incentive to marry again, which means you finance her future relationships. However, despite this, most men do choose to get married. This is primarily because most men want to have children of their own. Many others do so because of cultural expectations. Most are unaware of the dangers they face by signing on the dotted line. By far, the vast majority of men go into it without having the slightest idea of the sheer amount of life-ruining threats they are now vulnerable to. It is my hope that this video has played a small role in informing you of the risks that you may have previously been unaware of. If you do choose to marry, make sure that it is for the right reason, to have and raise children, because given the extreme risks, there is simply no reason to do it otherwise. In our next video, we will talk about how you can pick a good woman so that you can minimize the risk of divorce, and perhaps even actually have a chance at a happy, fulfilling marriage.